It's exciting to have ideas and to have thoughts that you just think matter, that make a difference, that you think the world needs to hear. And, you hope it has an impact. And I want to talk about motivation in a way I've thought about it for a very, very, very long time. And maybe perhaps not the way I've thought about it, but the way I've tried to not think about it. And it dawned on me one day, years after having gotten into motivation and reading a lot of books about development and motivation and goals and your why and all kinds of things. And it suddenly dawned on me that every motivational video, book, speaker, they had something in common. And I shouldn't say every, but like 99.9% of them. And it went something like this. Hi, my name is so and so. I struggled, but then suddenly I became richer. I became more famous. I became more sexy, and that's it. I became richer, more powerful, more sexy, and you can too. And then the theme would repeat. Hi, my name is so and so. I did so and so. And if you're not as rich as I am, you're not reaching your potential. Hi, I'm so and so. And if you're not as sexy as I am, you haven't reached your potential. Hi, I'm so and so. And again, the theme was over and over and over and over and over again. Hi, if you want to be successful, you need to be rich, you need to be famous, and you need to be freaking hot sexy. And I just cracked at some point, and I said, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Is that really the only thing that motivates us? Is that really the only thing as a society that we seek after? Is that it? Is that the definition of motivation? Is that the definition of success? Is that what brings happiness? Well, number one, from my background, I never really believed that, but I just hadn't noticed how pervasive it was. That the marketing centers around those three items. And, was it because that's what we're tempted by as human beings, money, power, and sex, that the motivational speakers caught on to that, and we kind of forced them to motivate us using our vanity and using right carnal pleasure? Or was it that that's what they used and it's been used over and over and over again so that we as society somehow believe that that's it? When I wake up in the morning, my goal is to one, become richer, two, become more famous, and three, become more sexy. Well, that's just empty. And of course, again, from my background, a religious one that I continue to participate in, right? We say, well, look, the love of money is not happiness at all. It's the root of all evil, right? A love of money, not money itself. And we talk about, how happiness is in relationships, happiness is in meaning, happiness is in purpose, right? You have books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, very deep book, talks about happiness being in meaning. You have research now that's coming out from positive psychology that is showing that happiness is maximized really not by the amount of wealth, but by the amount of relationships and the quality of those relationships. And if you meet somebody who's lived a really full life with no regrets, almost always it's centered around a life of meaning and relationships. And their meaning and relationships might not have made them famous, they may not have made them a lot of money, and they may not be a sex pot. And so again, I have to say, whenever I see a motivational speaker and they're always ripped and they've got the perfectly beautiful spouse and all their children went to Harvard and they're all famous writers and so accomplished that, well, they're the pinnacle of life. I have to shake my head and said, wait a minute, wait a minute. What about my grandma? Right? My grandma was never famous, ever. But you know what? That woman was one of the most amazing people I have ever known. She didn't write a New York Times bestseller. She was not ripped. But you know what? She showed up, and I knew that woman cared for me. She did. Grandma was, and I'm not joking. I'm not making this up. I had four grandparents. One died before I was born. The other one really didn't want anything to do with my family. My grandfather, married to my favorite grandmother, was a good man. I enjoyed time with him, but he was never really a role model. But my grandmother, man, just such a wonderful, giving, kind, but a stern and demanding woman. But she just lifted me up always by expecting a lot from me and letting me know I was loved. And because of her, I have a lot of great memories that have inspired me to be a better man. Were you going to tell me that somehow she would have been a better grandma if she would have been worth $20 million? Really? Are you going to tell me that somehow if she would have been some major sex pot who had stepped out on my grandpa and kind of had her pick of the litter here in town and been a millionaire because she could get with every rich person on earth using her body, that somehow she would have been a better grandma? Or that if she had been, some famous radio star or movie star, that somehow the quality of her care and concern for me would have been higher. She would have been a greater hero. Really? I mean, that is the most ridiculous and absurd idea I've ever heard. And so, wouldn't it be possible to say that motivation could be something like being the best grandma ever? Right? Being the kind of grandma that inspires your grandchild to live to their fullest potential, expecting enough out of them that they grow, but loving enough that they know that it's okay when they fail sometimes. I mean, couldn't that be reason? Right? I mean, can you imagine a motivational speaker showing a grandma with her grandchildren, right? Have you not reached the potential you've wanted to reach as a grandparent? Well, this is your seminar, right? I mean, come on. How about parents? I mean, in our society today, as parents, are we really reaching the levels that we've wanted to reach? Do our children absolutely know that we love them? Do we understand them well enough that as they struggle through life, we give them the room to experiment and have the wisdom to share ideas that inspire them, don't make them feel controlled, right? You know, that balance of directing but giving freedom? I mean, could we actually have the motivation to become the best parent alive, right? Well, I mean, I think so, but it sure looks like all the motivational speakers are like, that's just garbage, dude. I mean, I don't care if your son actually stayed out of drugs because you loved him, and but as long as you had this really fit body and had a few great sexual partners and had a lot of money, dude, who cares what happened to your son, right? Isn't that amazing? Well, and I guess that's the other part about motivation that just hit me so hard. I said, well, number one, like I've already shared, what about just being a good person? What about enjoying things and being fulfilled? Isn't that enough to motivate us, right? But I also hit this thing that everybody seems to say, well, you can have everything, right? There's this idea that anybody who tells you have to sacrifice one thing to get another they're just selling you something. Well, come on, you guys. Is that really is that a message we all believe? I mean, can I be a doctor, a lawyer, an astronaut, a mother, a father, and president of the United States all at the same time? Right? I mean, I know that's a stupid question. It's absolutely just an idiotic question to ask anybody. Of course you can't. So you have to look at it and say, well, you can't have everything. It's not possible. To be what you are today, you have to not be other things. That's called sacrifice. You have to give up one thing to get another. Well, where is that? Where's that talked about? Where is sacrifice honored? My grandmother, for example, she sacrificed money, power, fame, and sex, right? Now, I don't know. Maybe my grandfather had a great time. I never really asked. It wasn't my purview at the time, and it wouldn't be now either way. I don't want to know. But the fact of the matter is, she could have been other things in life and completely ignored me as a human being, but she would have had to sacrifice the influence she would have had on me. So again, when we talk about motivation, when we talk about becoming something, well, where's the honesty from the motivational speakers that says, look, you have to choose something. You have to choose something of value, and what you choose will necessarily make you sacrifice something else. Well, I think it's not talked about because how are you going to motivate somebody when you say, hey, look, if you have this, you're going to have to sacrifice that. I mean, I think it's just easy to say you can have all that you want if you just buy my program. Because what that means is that I can lie to you and you don't have to do the sacrifice part, which is the difficult part. Now, I guess, I don't know. I don't think it's really that difficult. When you sacrifice something, you should be giving it up for something better, right? Now, again, there are probably a lot better things in life than me that my grandma could have invested her time and her attention in, really. There were probably many, many things better than myself. But I tell you what, that investment in time and care and concern, to me, made a big, big difference. In fact, let's think for just a minute, right? We're all out there trying to make a big difference in the world. And again, I think for most motivational speakers, they don't mean to do this, but sometimes it's like, well, if you go out and get fame and money, you can bless the world. And what they mean to say is if you go out and selfishly raise a ton of money and do everything for yourself, then you bless the world, and guess what? Now you're famous. Well, were you blessing people or were you trying to get famous? Which was it, right? It seems like it's kind of mixed up. Was that charity or was it me getting famous and kind of using charity to kind of put the cherry on top, right? Using charity to say, oh, yeah, and I'm good too. Well, think about it for a minute. If we're so busy chasing money, power, and fame, and our neighbor's spouse just passed away, and you can see him out there in their garden just thinking hard, and it dawns on you that, you know what, you might step out to your neighbor and help them in their garden a bit, or I don't care. I mean, we have gardens out where I live, or maybe they're sweeping their walk, or maybe they're just sitting out in their backyard or whatever, but it dawns on you, you know what, they'd probably want to talk. And you decide to step over there and take some time and sit down and just listen. That's all you do. You listen for an hour and a half in an evening or in the morning. as your neighbor's going through this heartache and this pain and this challenge? Well, I want to ask you, is that going to make you richer? Will you increase your bank account when that's done? Yeah, I don't think so, right? Will you, when that is done, be more famous? Are you suddenly going to be a New York Times bestseller? Oh, no, I don't think so, right? And I sure hope it didn't make you sexier or get you something along those lines, right? In other words, when you stepped over there, you actually brightened the world. You lifted a load. You made a difference. And here's what's so amazing about that. When you walk away, how do you feel? I mean, if you can really sense that they felt heard and felt cared about, how do you feel? Great. You might not have gone over there for that reason. You might not have gone to sit next to your neighbor for the intention of feeling great. It might not have been a selfish thing. But when you walk away, you think, you know what? How wonderful that I lifted their load. You feel connected. You feel a bond. You feel close. And let me ask you, when you feel that connection and that closeness, what happens to your problems? What happens to your bills and your health issues and everything else you've been worried about? Well, guess what? Science proves that it disappears. At least for that moment in giving service and thinking of others. In that moment, your burdens seem bearable. Your burdens seem like there's something you can take. And for a moment, you're truly happy. You can feel it, right? Now, again, we don't do it to be, selfishly to get things. You were really giving. But let me ask you, if you were so focused on becoming the next trillionaire that you couldn't sit next to your neighbor, did you really have the right motivation? Right? Right? Did you really have the right motivation? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that money, power, and sex are all bad things. Believe me, I love money, I love power, and I definitely love sex. There is no doubt about it, right? No questions, right? I don't think they're bad. I don't, quote, avoid them just to avoid them. But what I'm saying is it seems like in our world, those have become the one and the only motivation. And that anything that gets in the way is somehow a pain in our arse, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. Studies on happiness have shown over and over again that rich relationships lead to happiness. That money, after a certain point, literally after you have enough money to pay for your needs, money really doesn't correlate to happiness anymore. And yet, what do? We constantly chase it. And here's something that's really interesting, right? If we take money, power, sex, that seems to be the one thing that you set your goals on. Are you underachieving? You could make more than you ever have before. Is that body not giving you what you want? Join my program and you'll be a sex pot before you know it, right? When do you ever reach the top? I mean, literally, I know a town where the $10 million homeowners are really upset at the $5 million homeowners. They think the $5 million homeowners are pulling their values down. Well, I can't wait until the $15 and $20 million homeowners come into town, right? Because do you ever really get rich enough? I mean, let's say you're making $100,000 a year. I mean, you would be considered rich by 95% of people's standards in this country. Well, but guess what? There are people making $500,000. But when you reach $500,000, wait a minute, have you really arrived? I mean, there are people making $1 million a year. You know that, don't you? Well, maybe you shouldn't be happy until you reach $1 million. Because heaven forbid that you should be content and grateful for the wonderful things in your life. I mean, heaven forbid that you sit on your porch one evening and you do nothing but think of the gratitude for the things that you have, for the blessings that are a part of your life, for the wonderful people you know, that really aren't powerful, that don't have money, like my grandma, or like a good friend of mine who loves gardening. Heaven forbid that you sit down for a moment and feel content and satisfied with the blessings you've been given. Right? I mean, I hope I'm not overdoing this. I hope this makes sense. I hope this is resonating. Again, I'm not against being a high achiever. In fact, I am. I'm somebody who always drives for the best, financially, right, in my health and other things. But what I'm saying is the balance, right? It seems as if there's only a focus on the money and the power and the sex. And again, it's not only that when you reach one level, there's somebody higher, right? I mean, you get in physical shape, but oh my gosh, somebody else has a bigger breast than you do. Well, then we got to have surgery, right? Or you reach a certain level, and oh my gosh, some guy's bigger. So now, I got to take some kind of, I don't know what you take to beef up, right? Obviously, I haven't worked on it, right? But some kind of hormone to beef myself up, right? Or, oh my gosh, I did a marathon, but he did an Ironman, so he's better than I am. Well, okay. Well, do you ever really reach the pinnacle? And then what happens when you get older and your body doesn't work so well, right? Or some financial catastrophe happens? Well, how do you deal with that if that was your only motivation, was to have those resources? And then, of course, there's another angle you have to look at. Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in the world, but is that because he's really the most talented? Or is that because he's one of the few men who decided, well, not few, there's a lot, or is it because that's something that he made an entire focus? Are there others who, had they made that their focus, could have beat Warren Buffett in terms of wealth? Right? I mean, is it possible? And I could choose any other wealthy person as well. How about the Olympics? Are there people who, had they chose a different life path, could have won the Olympics? I mean, once you become the most powerful, the most rich, the most sexy person on earth, is it that you're the most? Or was it just that you set your heart on those things so much that you maximize them? And somebody else said, I'm going to be the best father. But they could have kicked your trash in the Olympics, right? They could have actually come out there and in business run circles around you. But they were so busy being the best dad they could be, they didn't get around to making millions of dollars. Well, what's wrong with that, right? But I guess what I'm saying is, isn't it kind of a false illusion that somehow when we reach this pinnacle that we've arrived, we're there, somehow life now is happy? When there's somebody always going to be more wealthy? Or you never know if somebody else, had they chosen a different virtue to chase, that they could have been better than you? Doesn't it seem almost like a hollow accomplishment? And again, I don't mean to overdo it, but what I am saying, what I am promoting, what I am putting out there is, maybe we need a few more motivational speakers who stand up and say, hey, my name is Bob, and if you come to my program, your relationships are going to be richer, more powerful, and more rewarding than they've ever been, right? Or somebody says up and says, are you sad? Or you wish you could accomplish more in life? Well, maybe you should focus on your family and not so much on your job. Right? Maybe giving a different alternative. Hey, do you find yourself sad and out of energy? Well, don't work out more. Leave the gym. Go follow a hobby. Take pictures. Watch birds, right? Maybe there are things that aren't being promoted that are keeping us from truly finding satisfying, fulfilling lives. Maybe the pride, maybe the vanity, in fact, is adding to our discontent and keeping us from enjoying ourselves as opposed to helping us reach it. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Again, not only do I have just my life's experience, but research says happiness comes with relationships, happiness comes with meaning and worthwhile purpose. And I think as a society, as we see the challenges come and as we see the rifts among us grow, as we search for that elusive idea of being happy and being fulfilled, that maybe we ought to start looking for motivational speakers that teach us about happiness, and not just vanity, and not just pride.